when Kant talks about the object, most objects are, of course, inanimate. But this is the moment where Hegel kind of steps in with the consciousness when he says not all objects are like that. And the most interesting objects are not like that, because the most interesting object we encounter is another human being, which is also an object for us, but not like other objects. What is different about the human being? Okay, well, for one thing, the approach our mind has towards other human being, at least at the beginning, is similar to the approach of objects, right? What do we want to do to other human beings? We want to control them, just like any other object. You want the human being to do what you want them to do. But what is the problem? Do they do what we want them to do? No, that's the damnedest thing. They don't. And the more you want them to do what you want them to do, the less they actually do it. If you command them, they get mad at you. And then they try to command you. And that is the confrontation which we encounter literally every single day. It's not just this abstraction which Hegel is talking about. This is real life. This is what we see constantly happening. Your boyfriend wants to go to a movie, and you don't. Why not? I want to go to a movie, you damn idiot. No, let's go to a football game. Why? Stupid football game. What do? Do you submit to them? Do you say, okay, you're the master, I'll do whatever you want? Is that the good approach? Is this going to help your relationship? On the other hand, do you stick your way or highway? Either we're going to a movie right now or we're breaking up. Now, Hegel takes it all the way. He says, when confrontation happens, what is the highest stake you can put up? What is the highest level of confrontation you can possibly have? You can put your life on a line, and his or her line. That's the highest thing, right? You have nothing more valuable than that. And when confrontation goes all the way, this is what is happening. So two people essentially are putting their life on the line. It's a battle for life or death. Then what happens? Well, of course, one possibility, one of them does die, in which case the whole thing is over. There's no more to talk about. But that doesn't always happen. What else can happen? One of them prevails. The other one gives up. The other one says, okay, you know what, I don't want to die, so I'll do whatever you want. And this is when this relation of master and servant begins. But, yes, the irony there is this. Once you've done that, once you became a master, you got a recognition, and the key word there is recognition. But who did you get it from? Is that your equal? No, you feel like it's not worth very much, because once somebody turns into a servant or a slave, their recognition is no longer worthy. At the same time, the way Hegel puts it, you actually then depend on them, because now they are doing things for you. They are the ones who produce things. You are just consuming those things. But you depend on them as a result. So instead of getting the recognition you actually wanted, you become dependent on them. And in the end of the day, tables turn. They become your master. So that is kind of a very simple way to explain it. This is the reading kind of in a nutshell. For Kant, this is the object versus the thing in itself, right? He thinks of inanimate objects. Hegel doesn't care about inanimate objects. To him, that's not even important. What is important is people, how we relate to other people, and that is the most important thing. Self-consciousness is an in for itself, and as a result of its being in and for itself for another. In other words, it is only as recognized being. So, indeed, we're not going all the way to life and death, although sometimes we do. I mean, right now we have a war in Iraq. That's an example. And any other war is an example of that. But for the most part, we still go through this relationship with other people. We want to be recognized. All of us, of course we want to be recognized for what a beautiful, wonderful person we are. But how do you get this recognition? How do you achieve that? Can you coerce people into that? And that's what most people try to do. Either coerce other people or trick them into it somehow and then get this recognition, but then it's fake. It's not worth anything. So that is the secret to life success. How do you get other people to recognize you? And that is a key here. Now, part of me is outside of me. We understand other people are just like us. It's like a part of me, essentially. But that part of me does not obey me like all the other objects and things, which I can do whatever I want with. I can take this bottle and put it on this table right here, and the bottle is not going to say anything or do anything to me. It will peacefully transfer. But with other people, it never is like that. You tell them to do something, and they don't. They, in fact, like I said, they try to control you all the time. They control you even when they don't do anything. Just them looking at you. Just them looking at you. Think about it. When other people see you, do you immediately recognize the difference? It's like, how do I look? What do they think about me? And that is affecting us all the time, and it's not only inescapable. We shouldn't escape it. That's actually one of the problems many people have. They try to avoid it. They try to shut themselves off. Not only it is impossible, it will make you more miserable. Because in the end of the day, you actually want this recognition. It's just that when you can't get it, it's like, oh, the damn thing is not working, so to hell with it completely. And that's what many people end up with. Because especially in a society like ours, lives are very atomized. They are separated. And Hegel actually explains why it's a problematic quality. Okay, so the winner becomes the master. Master is self-sufficient, got the recognition, but as a result, it turns out that no satisfaction. The recognition which is being coerced, which is forced, is not a true recognition. For one thing, the servant doesn't really recognize you. He probably thinks the master is an idiot. I just obey him because, well, he happened to be the master. I don't really adore him. I don't really think he's great. Even if I'll tell him he's great, that's not real. And the master himself then also thinks, why don't other masters recognize me? What's this poor slave? I don't care about his recognition. I want other masters to recognize me. I want everybody, the whole world recognize me. So that is the problem. And this reading specifically will influence Marx. When we talk about Marx, you will see that Marx actually was highly impressed by this. Through his labor, the servant cultivates and educates himself, and master becomes dependent on the servant. In the end, the master-servant relation, purely formal. Servant is the one who truly is free. For he only depends on himself and created himself through his work and through the objects. Because in reality, he is the one who produces things. And producing things is what's important here. Transforming the world around you. Now, happiness and freedom. There's how Hegel completely changes the picture. He says happiness cannot be the goal. In this he disagrees with Aristotle and with Mill and with everybody else. Well, Mill, of course, lived after Hegel, so Mill actually read Hegel. He was impressed by Hegel. Part of the reason he changed his theory a little bit from the Bentham one was Hegel. But what is a true goal? He says it's freedom. It's not happiness, it is freedom. Freedom is the self with itself in another. But he understands freedom in a very different way from what most people understand freedom. Now, of course, even already within this relationship, we can figure it out. What is freedom in terms of these two people, master and servant relations? What would be freedom for the servant? Yeah.
Not be like subject to the master?
Yeah, not to obey the commands of the master. Do his own thing in life. And what would be the freedom for the master? Well, you can say that, but is that achievable? Because he wants the recognition. then it kind of overturns the whole idea of it. If you no longer require the recognition, are you even still alive? While we are alive, we do want recognition. It's just that we need to get it. But he doesn't want to be dependent on the servant. So they don't want to be dependent on each other, and at the same time, they can help it. So that's the interesting thing about freedom. And the whole theory, Hegel's ethical theory, is a self-actualization theory. Remember actualization from Aristotle. Potentiality and actuality. Acorn is potentially anything. Then the oak is actually something. So we are like acorns. We are potentially anything, but what is the actuality we are striving towards? What is the goal in life? Once you figure that one out, that's when you can actually find happiness, because that is the dependent on the goal. You cannot be happy if you're pursuing the wrong goal in life, if you're not actualizing yourself. So the success in life, the best outcome of life, is to be able to actualize yourself, to achieve something. And of course, for that, you need to understand what you need to achieve. But there is more to it than that. For one thing, of course, choosing self and becoming self is a product of historical development. Where do we even get those goals? How do we know what we want to be? Think about it. Who do you want to be in life? Any role you can pick, you don't have to even say it, would be dependent on where the society is today based on its development, right? Because if you look at it, say, 1,000 years ago, would you be able to actualize yourself in the same way, like become a student or something, especially the girls, right? Like the society back then, like, oh, the girl belongs to the kitchen. Even if you were a noble girl, for the most part, there was a very few exceptions. They were all suppressed by their husbands and the entire society. Same thing for many people who are not like white Europeans and so on. But even for white Europeans, many of them were peasants. And if you were born peasant 1,000 years ago, could you then become a lord or something? No, that was not even a possibility. So the actualization depends on where historical development is today. And it's subject to the restrictions of society. Now, Hegel is the first one who realized how important history is. Historicism. What exactly is historicism? A crucial feature of Hegel's philosophy. Commitment to historicism. Claim that ideas are not eternal objects, but products of their time. Ideas develop with the society. You can't come up with an idea out of the thin air. That doesn't work that way. You get these ideas from people around you. You get them slowly, bit by bit, and these ideas proliferate in society, they live in society, and they are a product of society. The truth of any idea cannot be understood apart from its origin and the role in its historical settings. So if you want to look at why medievals thought the way they did, you have to look at the society they lived in. What was happening there? This is what influenced their worldview. So Hegel is an idealist. But interestingly enough, he's different from Berkeley, who was subjective idealist, who thought that mind is the only real thing and the reality around the mind is a product of the mind. He is also different from Kant, and he disagreed with Kant. He did not think there is such thing as the thing in itself. He actually says that's a fake concept. But how does Hegel look at it? He looks at it the following way. These forms are not static. They are not set. They are changing. The form depends on the society you live in, and as society progresses, the form's changing too. So you can put here something like the absolute idea. And this would be perfect understanding of the society, the world, and the way we are in. And this would be how we understand the world today. Is this perfect today? Do we have a perfect understanding of ourselves and the world around us? No. But can we improve it? And Hegel says yes. And this is exactly what is happening, first of all, in history. The history is society slowly moving towards what he calls freedom, realization of this idea. So let's say this is society in a year during the Greeks, 300 BC. Now as time progresses, the view, the form of understanding of society changes. Changes again. And it's closer and closer to this absolute understanding of society. But it's happening with time. It's like the year 1000 AD, the year 2000 AD, and so on. And we're doing it as society as a whole. He calls the whole thing as spirit. What exactly is spirit? Well, that's basically everything, including, first of all the people who live and ever lived. The spirit develops in society. Do the objects then exist only in our mind? Because that's one way to understand idealism. But no, Hegel is not what is known as subjective idealism. His objective idealism, he is actually saying that the objects are absolutely real. It's just that the mind is in the objects. Not objects are in the mind. The mind is in the objects. So that's the absolute idealism. The absolute is something completely self-contained that does not need anything else in order to exist. It is not only ultimate substance, but also a living subject. And it lives through history. And we are all part of it. Right? The living substance is being which is in truth subject. What does it mean? Rather than objects having their existence within the mind is inherent in the objects. And for this reason, it's easier for us to understand the world because we actually understand in ourselves. When we understand in the world, we understand in ourselves. To him who looks at the world rationally, the world looks rationally back. Reason is at the core of all this. So just like for Aristotle, reason for him is the answer. If you're approaching the world with reason, you get better results. You get better understanding of the world and of yourself. What is the relationship between mind and nature? Well, there's a close connection. The concepts, and the concept, by the way, when he says the concept, he doesn't mean words. It's a little bit bigger than words. Remember conceptualism. You may not remember when we talked about the three ways of approaching universal. One was realism, universals are real. The other one was nominalism, universals are just words. And the third one in between was conceptualism. So that's the idea. Conceptualism tells us that the universal are real concepts in our mind and in reality. The concept is a genuine first. The things are what they are through the action of the concept, immanent in them, revealing itself in them. It seems a little bit strange, but if you think about it, you can kind of understand that there's a point to it. So humanity, following Schelling, Hegel says, nature is a petrified and unconscious intelligence. And humanity is a part of nature that emerged that is not only conscious, but also self-conscious and able to reflect. So think about this idea. We are part of nature, right? We are part of nature. But we're studying nature. So what is going on? With us, nature studies itself. Each one of us is nature literally looking at itself and studying itself. We're not a separate entity. We're part of this. But at the same time, we are looking at it as if from the side and trying to understand, what are we? And this is, again, what we do and should do, and this is what Aristotle meant when he was saying that the life of contemplation is the highest life, because we are the only ones who are able to do it. The dog doesn't think about itself as part of nature. It doesn't think at all. It just gets up in the morning, gets her walk, takes her dump under the tree, has her snacky poo, right? We can do more than that, and we should, because we're the only ones who can do more than that. That's why we're doing science, that's why we're doing all the philosophy and so on, and trying to understand ourselves. Not just ourselves as human beings, but ourselves as part of this whole thing, the whole nature, which is this amazing, huge universe expanding and turning into something else. Now, Hegel avoids Cartesian dualism because he does not think as an opposition, matter and spirit. He thinks that matter actually and spirit are the same things. Mind is the most organized and developed form of matter, and matter is the least organized and developed form of mind. So, of course, we are physical, but at the same time we are spiritual, just like everything is both physical and spiritual. There's no distinction here. The division into spiritual and material is a fake distinction in the first place. It's like two poles on the same continuum, right? Two ends of the same stick. How is absolute spirit and human spirit related? Well, spirit, Geist, he uses the word Geist in German, which, by the way, funny enough, in German the word Geist means spirit, and it also means mind. So it actually is the same word, and sometimes it's even translated as the mind. Phenomenology of spirit, if you look at an older edition, it's called Phenomenology of Mind, because you can translate it as Phenomenology of Mind. So the spirit, the whole, which is larger than the sum of individual members. It's like, good example would be school spirit. What is a school spirit? What do we mean when we say school spirit? Yeah.
You have pride in your school.
Yeah, but like, is it an individual feeling? Is it like one person?
I think it's like more of a community, like more feeling of like multiple people.
It's a combination of all the people who are currently in this school, and all the time before, and probably even after. Like literally everybody, all the students who were part of this school, and professors and everybody. So that's kind of like this with spirit in this case. Spirit, of course, involves all the human beings who ever lived, who will live, who live right now, but it's even more than that. Now, his ethics specifically, like in phenomenology, it's a little bit an early work, but he worked it out later, and his latest theory, even though it doesn't contradict it, but it's kind of developed from the early one. So according to Hegel, ethics, the highest form of ethics, is Sittlichkeit. Sittlichkeit in German means community life. He kind of doesn't like the word morality, and he calls morality a more primitive type of ethics, which, by the way, he thinks what Kant's theory, deontological ethics, was. Because it kind of looks at it in a very individualistic and detached way, which, according to Hegel, is completely unrealistic. We're born into a community. We grow up in community. We become mature persons by being socialized. From the very beginning, we define our self-identity and our concepts of overall scheme of things in terms of our communal life. This is how we know what is good and evil. This is how we know what morality is. It's a communal values, but they also are changing with the society. Because if you look at the communal values at the primitive people thousands of years ago, they were drastically different from ours. Then, of course, ancient Egypt, already different from that, but still very different from ours. The Greeks probably are among the closest, but nonetheless, they also had some problems. So the Sittlichkeit, he says, there are three groups you can think about when you think about that. Family, which has relationship based on love. Civil society, that would be relationship based on economics. Economic bourgeois type relationship, profit, mutual benefit. But the highest one is the state, because the state is both family and civil society, but with political system in addition to that. And only in a state the person becomes truly free. That's just like in Aristotle. Remember, Aristotle was saying that the state is the highest form of society, and for Hegel too. And many people accused him of being totalitarian in that sense, but that's not the case at all. So he goes first at the Greeks, talks about the Greeks, and he admires them greatly. They think they had the ethical community where basically people find their identity, happiness, and sense of meaning by participating in a community life, which is fantastic. But there was one problem with that. It was unreflective. In other words, people didn't know why. They didn't understand why the society is the way it is. They were not shaping it consciously. They were just going along with it. And that's why it started to crumble. Remember, we talked about it when sophists appeared and started questioning everything. Why was it the case? Because the society became more open. People started to see the life of different societies, and they started questioning that why exactly do we live the way we do? When you're born, you think that's the only way to live, but then it turns out that other people live different lifestyle, have different culture, and then you are becoming more cynical about it. The relativism arises, and you say, well, if everybody does things differently, then maybe there's no good way to do things anyway. And this is what was happening specifically. The rise of individualism, individualistic morality, where individual is thinking of each one of us as our own living truth. Right? I am the one who knows exactly the truth and how things are. Everybody else is confused. They are just stupid. I know better. And that is actually a similarity between our society and the Greek society. So at that point in Greek society, Socrates emerged, and Socrates was seeking the universal order within individual understanding. Remember what Socrates was doing? What was he doing? Yes, absolutely. He was looking for universal concepts because that is the idea. What is justice? We all agree on. It's not like he was asking, remember that's the sophist's position. What is just for me may not be just for you. And then as a result, like for me it is just to enslave you. And for you it is just to be enslaved. That's the result of that. And Socrates obviously was rebelling against that, and he was looking for the universal concepts which are exactly meant to counter that, to say, no. There is a justice for everybody. And if it's not according to this justice, then it is unjust. It is unjust for me, and it is unjust for you. And it's not relative. So that's exactly what he was trying to do. How about Jesus? That's another interesting question. Many people compare Jesus to Socrates. Why? Well, for one thing, they both ended up with the same result, right? Socrates was put to death, and Jesus was put to death. Of course, Socrates didn't rise up, but at least up to the point where they both died for what they believed in. But was Jesus also trying to defend universal values? Because many people pointed out that it actually is very individualistic. Why? Because you're the one who will or will not be saved in the end of the day. There's no saving as a group. We cannot be saved as a group. Each of us personally will either be condemned to eternal damnation or saved. So in effect, you are on your own in that. You can only save yourself. Whether or not Jesus himself meant it, well, it depends on how you interpret Jesus. Note that, of course, one of the reasons why Nietzsche distinguished Jesus and Christianity, he thought actually Jesus wasn't like that. Jesus was just a strong individual who had his own point of view. His followers, on the other hand, were like a cattle. They were not thinking for themselves. They were just doing whatever they were told. So from that point of view, Christianity becomes, of course, a lot more individualistic. Okay, so anyway, the Greeks first experienced it, and this is the key word for early Marx, as we will see, and very interesting concept, alienation. What exactly is alienation? While what was happening in Greek society represented an advance over uncritical spirit of the early Greeks, it also caused a sense of alienation because individuals became fragmented as their public and private lives became separated. Public and private lives. Public demands on you seem alien to you when your private life demands different things. Hegel thinks that the Greeks immediately, it was reflected in Greek plays. Tragic Greek plays showed this conflict between the individual and the demands of the society. Now we will come back to alienation with Marx because it is indeed very interesting concept. So Hegel examines a number of attempts to develop individualistic ethics. In each case, he argues that morality they embrace depends on a concept that can be made meaningful only within shared practices of ethical community. And that's when he starts criticizing Kant specifically, Kant's theory, because to him Kant is the most individualistic idea of the ethics you can possibly imagine. Each of us, completely isolated from society, somehow refers to this universal law. Remember the imperative. Where is this coming from, this imperative? Is it like ingrained in your brain? No, Hegel says that is not the case at all. In fact, you are getting it from the society around you. You have to understand that those are communal values of your society, the society you live in. These are not bloodless principles. If you look at what Kant was saying more carefully, you will see that there are several problems. One of the biggest problems he sees is a conflict with desire. In other words, Kant tells us, even if we desire X, but our duty requires that we do Y, we should do Y. And Hegel says, that's impossible and stupid. Our duty should be to do what we desire, and our desire should be to do our duty. They should be the same thing. If they're not the same thing, it's not going to work. You're going to believe that your duty is to do X, but you will still do Y. And even if you coerce yourself somehow to do your duty, you will not be happy. That's not going to be happening because you will be forced to do what is right by your other self. So this is like a separation between this I, which Kant called empirical I, and the ego, which is the real I. And Hegel says when these two are in conflict, essentially you are not going to be happy and you're not going to feel like you're doing what you should do. The universal laws Kant is talking about do not work when you start applying them. Specifically, let's look at his maxim, right? So remember, his maxim was you should do what you think everybody should be doing, basically. If you want it to become universal law, then do it. He says, okay, let's look at stealing somebody's property. Now, you only may say that stealing is a bad thing, stealing is prohibited, if you generally accept the idea that people should have private property. But what if you don't? What if you're actually okay with people sharing things? Can it be the case? Well, there's no reason why it cannot, because the idea of private property is the idea of society we currently live in. Was it always the case that everything was private property? Well, obviously not. And even in some societies now, that may not be the case. So there is only a contradiction between these two propositions. One of them is a rule that justifies stealing, and the other is institution of private property. You cannot at the same time be for private property and for stealing. You have to choose one of them. But there's no contradiction other than that. If you actually reject the idea of private property, you can steal. And there's no maxim which will force you. In other words, somebody can honestly say, yes, I want people to steal. I don't mind that. Steal from me if you are more clever or whatever. And I will steal from you. Is it impossible? Can people hold this kind of view? Yeah, and some people actually do. They think, I'm more clever than other people, I'll steal more. I have no problem with them stealing from me if they can. But they can't, and I can. And so that's why I don't mind it. By itself, this is an empty concept. So this cannot possibly be a contradiction, as Kant thought it is. None of these maxims are really contradictions. What they contradict is the way other people look at it, the societal values, right? So this is exactly where the problem may arise, because you may hold this view, but other people disagree with you and punish you for holding this view. And that, of course, is not fun. So that would be where the real contradiction arises. In fact, he thought that the values are always values of the society. And even those great reformers, right? Jesus, Marx, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, they criticized the society based on its own values. The criticism wasn't that there are some other values which we do not live up to, but that we don't live up to the values of our own society we already have. Like if you look at the Martin Luther King, obviously the society already held the value that all people are equal. But it was not what the practice was at the time. And that is the criticism. Like, why do we think that we should act one way, but we actually are acting different way? This is hypocrisy. And you always do that because you cannot escape this societal type of understanding of values. That's the only way you can even have values. There's no values outside of society. If you, again, were born with monkeys and lived in a jungle and never saw another person in your life, you wouldn't have any values. Where would you get values? The values you get from other people. They are societal. So the ethical life in the final stage should come back to the Greek ideal, but with a twist. It's not the same thing as the Greeks lived. It's a world of social roles and institutions. However, it's not unreflective. In other words, we should build those institutions according to reason, according to our understanding of how the society should function. And if we achieve that, then we will achieve the unalienated happy life. So that brings to his political philosophy, and like everything else, it always is connected to politics. You cannot escape that. So we're all striving for freedom. Freedom is the ultimate end, the ultimate goal. However, individual freedom can only be realized in the state. There's no way escaping that, because the state is what gives you tools to achieve your freedom. The state may do better job or worse job to do it, but it still always does certain job. And without it, there's no concept of freedom. The concept of freedom can only be within the society you live in. So remember the three-door example. Let's come back to it, because it is an interesting example to think about and to understand a little bit better maybe what is happening here. So you have three doors, right? Remember, we asked first which one you pick without knowing what's behind them. You're free to pick any one you choose. But which one do you pick? And then you can only pick randomly, which is not a choice at all. Then we said, like, behind one, you'll be killed behind. But let's change it a little bit, because that's not very realistic. But let's make it more realistic and more applicable to the way we actually live. Let's say this is your life after you finish college. Here you can be a philosopher. Here you can be a lawyer. And here you can be a musician. Now, first of all, notice that this is choices given to you by society. They may or may not be there based on society. You cannot just pull them out of vacuum. But even once they are there, which one do you pick? Okay, well, I kind of had an inkling that you might. But note that interesting one, some people would pick a musician, right? Is it a good choice? And this is where the question becomes, because you don't really know what's going to happen. The more you know about it, the better it is. But how do you do this choice? What do you decide based on? Because if you ask other people, great majority of them would say, are you stupid? You're not going to make any money. Be a musician. Nobody's going to listen to you. You know how musicians live? You're going to be a waiter in a restaurant and like playing the guitar in your spare time. Out of millions and millions of musicians, only maybe one or two making real good money. Well, should you listen to them? That's the problem, right? But the only way to answer it is to look within yourself. You are the one who's going to live your life. So you are the one who should pick that. You will be actualizing yourself by making these choices. And that is extremely important. And really, like, things may turn out to be different than you think right now. That one thing, you should be realistic, of course, about what you can achieve. What do you really care about and how good you can be in that. Because if you're doing what you really care about, if you're doing something you are dedicated to 100%, you will be successful. If you're doing something which you don't like at all, if you hate it, even if it is a profession with good money, you're not going to be successful. And then we hear cases like, I remember I was watching the Top Chef. I don't know, do you guys ever watch Top Chef? Well, they have all these chefs competing. But the interesting point there is this. Many of them, I noticed, when they talk about them, say, yeah, I was an engineer, but you know what? I dropped it, and now I'm a chef. And it's like, that's such a great job. You were making good money. Why did you do that? Well, I hated what I was doing, and I'm happy. Yeah, because all the money in the world cannot replace happiness. Think how miserable it is. Many people think, yeah, I'll live nicely at the retirement. I'll work for many years saving up, and then when I finally retire, that's when I will be happy. And that is so wrong on so many levels. Well, for one thing, when you get older, you actually have a lot less opportunity to enjoy yourself. Trust me, because there's all sorts of issues come up with your health and so on, which prevent you from really enjoying yourself. Many people, especially who retire like in their 60s and 70s, very quickly discover that they're no longer able to enjoy at all. They are lucky if they're just surviving, even if they have all the money they want, simply because, like I said, the state of health deteriorates. There was a story just recently I read, I think in Wall Street Journal, about a couple, so sad, like they retired, right? They really wanted to travel the world. They only made a couple of trips, and then she got Alzheimer's. And her husband is now taking care of her because she doesn't even remember who she is. So much for travel now, right? And that is a terrible situation to begin with, because he still loves her dearly and obviously doesn't want to put her in a home or anything, but she doesn't even know who he is. She doesn't know what's going on anymore. And he brushes her hair, gives her baths, and so on. The point, though, is don't wait for happiness to come many years from now. Happiness should be happening right now. If it's not happening right now, it may never happen. So in that sense, your choice is what will or will not make you happy, right now and in the future. And that is the million-dollar choice. And that is actually what freedom would be. When you make the rational choice based on reason, based on what you understand yourself to be, your society to be, and it's closely connected again with the society, because you cannot think of this outside of the society itself. How successful you'll be as a musician or a lawyer or philosopher or anybody else depends on the society. If society tomorrow collapses, if as a result of, I don't know, all these wars or whatever, we have a civil war or something, you're not going to be lawyers or musicians, right? You're going to be soldiers in the Civil War, if you're still going to be alive. So that is a very important point here. The state itself is a realization of freedom. For the state is not an abstract confronting its citizens, as many people think. They are part of it, like members of an organic body, where no member is an end and none is means. It is the realization of freedom, of the absolute final purpose that exists for its own sake. So to Hegel, the state is a realization of freedom. It's just that the state isn't always what it is supposed to be. Rational goal is to achieve the perfect absolute state. But how do you achieve it? Well, no state is perfect, so you can improve it based on reason, based on what institutions do actually serve us as a people. He is saying that in ancient society there was only one person who was free, and that was the monarch. Everybody else was enslaved. Then, later on, some people were free and some people were not free. Those would be the slaves. And it's only in modern society everybody can truly be free. But it still is closely connected to the organization of the state. He does not deify the status quo. And some people think that what he's saying is the state as it is today is perfect, end of story. No. He realizes that no state is perfect. But some states are better than others, and we all understand that. And we can still do even better and try to achieve a perfect state. Maybe we'll never will, but we certainly can always do better. So in that sense, you may say, there is a disagreement. Can you reach the absolute idea? Well, you can probably think of it as being asymptotic. In other words, we can get closer and closer and closer to it, and maybe we'll never achieve it completely. But at least we can always get somewhat closer to it. So history overall, according to Hegel, is purposeful. It's not just one damn thing happen after another. It appears to be this kind of a slaughter bench at which the happiness of peoples, the wisdom of states, the virtue of individuals have been sacrificed, right? The constantly different wars, monarchs, and people kill each other, and one damn thing happens after another. But he says that's not true. If you actually look at it carefully, there does seem to be some sort of development where we are achieving something. Indeed, if you look at these ancient societies, and the way they progressed to medieval societies, that was a step up. And the way it progressed towards more democratic modern societies was the step up. And hopefully we can do even better than that. So if we look below the surface, we will see that the history progressed rationally, that it represents the rational necessary course of the world spirit. The spirit whose nature is indeed always one and the same, but whose one nature unfolds in the course of the world. So for Hegel, the world history is a progress of consciousness of freedom. We are more and more conscious of our freedom. We are better and better at realizing it. We have more and more options. We are able to achieve them, and so people are happier and happier. That's the goal, the ultimate goal. Now, on the one hand, in pursuing subjective particular interests, we're a product of our culture. Our interests are dictated by what we understand our culture to be and what our culture gives us. But at the same time, the choices available to us The choice is made available by the society. But on the other hand, the life of the nation is shaped by our decisions and the rest of the people. We are the ones who make it up. We are the ones who are moving it. It's interesting what he would say about the modern situation, but there are several things he said which kind of, I think, may be applicable too. He was saying that at every period of history there is one state which is the most advanced and represents the spirit of the time. But then it always falls down, and another state emerges to replace it. And he also was talking a lot about historical individuals who play their role, representative of what is happening in society at the time. Napoleon was such a person. Well, he wasn't familiar with, say, Stalin and Hitler, but he would probably say they were as well. And these people, he's saying, by themselves, they're like marionettes. They actually are simply playing the role they are given by spirit. They themselves represent what the spirit at the time actually wants to be happening. And that's why they kind of come on top. That doesn't necessarily mean they are even smarter or better than other people, but they play their role and then they leave. And they usually leave pretty badly, like Napoleon ended up dying on the island, Hitler committed suicide, and so on. Practically all those great individuals ended up with rather bad end. So then he famously says that art, religion, and philosophy are all attempts to represent the spirit, right? They are different ways to represent what the spirit is about. And to him, art is actually the most primitive one. That's the first one we started with. Art is just seeking the truth by trying to show it, to give it to our senses. Right? The works of art, we perceive them with our eyes, with our ears, so it's the most primitive way you can do it. The next step up was actually religion. He thinks religion was, in that sense, better than art, because it was giving us the same thing, but through myths. And myths are already more conceptualized. Christianity, in that sense, is even more interesting. Why is Christianity more interesting? Because that was the first time when we started to realize that man and God is the same thing. Jesus. Jesus is the first man who is also a God. So next step would be to realize that all men are God, or gods. And that is really kind of the end state of that. Human spirit finally realizes that the only God is the spirit itself. There is no other God. We are God. That is the God. And so philosophy is the highest one of the three, because philosophy finally talks about these things in not as a myth, not as a picture, but in concepts, in words. It's just these concepts have to be developed so you could actually understand them better, and they should represent the reality better, get to the point when the concept is equal to reality and reality is equal to the concept. So that would be kind of the final point of history.